Hello and welcome to another recording of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface. And Father, today I want to talk about something that is a common problem within sales. This will be applicable to the show. It might even be a blind spot of the show as I go through it. And I think it's something that could be very powerful to know, as it could be a weak spot for anyone who's essentially doing missionary work or, quite frankly, even talking about Jesus in any capacity. And what this problem is that when you have a solution, a product, whatever the case might be, that has multiple answers, multiple benefits, if you will, if we're sticking within the sales term, and you go and talk to someone and you talk about the benefits and the features that are most important to you, but they might not resonate with someone else. So to give an example here, we're talking about eggs. Eggs can do all kinds of different things. They can be in every breakfast, scrambled eggs, Benedict, all the different ways you can make eggs. And if you see someone who's never heard of eggs and says, hey, use eggs, they're the perfect things for breakfast, and that's ultimately what you should only use them for, that person might come away and go, well, I guess I have no need for eggs. All I do is make desserts and cakes. And meanwhile, eggs are a component of desserts and cakes. So the solution to this problem, by the way, is building a relationship with the person you're talking to and finding out what matters to them, and then, telling them about there. But as we are obviously on the podcast, Father and Joe, it's a very natural question then that goes, going to Mass has a ton of different benefits. And the list is really, really big. And I think what might be beneficial is, since we can't have a conversation with someone talking back to us about what might be most important to them, but to actually get some of the benefits that people get from Mass that might not be the ones that we personally see as the most important or powerful benefits. Because just like eggs that can be used in 20,000 different meals, the benefits that someone would get from going to Mass and receiving the Eucharist is a really long list of benefits. So I wanted to have this conversation because when we have a conversation of, why should you go to Mass? Or maybe you're talking with your kids who haven't gone in a while. Having some benefits that go beyond just why it's important to you is tremendously powerful in having successful conversations. So that's the direction I want to take today's episode, Father.
Wow.
Help a lot of people.
I really like it. I really like that framing in terms of sales. And yeah, sales are providing a solution to a problem. Sales are generated by a problem. And I love that insight. So simple, but really super important, that some solutions, some products are solving multiple problems. And so what's the right one? And ultimately, one of the things that I'm doing a lot with, and I'm happy to sort of advertise it in this context, is developing more teaching and tools around accompaniment. And so even our Institute for Ministry Formation formed a partnership with the Diocese of Pittsburgh starting back in February or so to help the diocese foster more of a culture of accompaniment, and then pressing that all the way into the parish level. One of the applications of that being evangelization, that if we want to help people give their yes to Jesus Christ and be initiated into the sacraments, then we need to walk with them. And so everything needs to be personalized in a way. And that's actually at multiple levels, not just to align the message with the person, because GPT can really do that, but there is actually a formative element about those relationships as well. The very process of me listening to you and responding to you is a mutually formative process and helps us grow in our humanity. In any event, just recognizing the personal tailoring of the message to the individual that you're speaking to is really, really valuable. And again, I always like when we can draw insights from things like sales and business and see how those apply. That's where your and my dialogue is always fun and fruitful. So I really appreciate that. And I think about, well, one of the things is if you just go to Mass, you'll figure it out. Like you'll start to discover all of the benefits that are there over time, because that's going to change. What we need changes over time. Um, when you're a young man trying to find your way in the world, then having the having the opportunity to connect with Jesus at Mass and keep reconnecting with your ultimate purpose, uh, which is to know, love, and serve Him, and then desire to make a gift for Him in the world as you set out on your path, is really valuable. When you're married and start to have children and you want to give the best to your children, then you discover, like, wow, look at that, I already have the best. I'll conform them in the faith. And then when you're old and life is more behind you, then you're in a process of thanksgiving and looking towards the ultimate reality in life after death. And then well, there it is. The pledge of future glory is there in the Eucharist. And so, if we just signed up and locked in, then we would discover a lot of things along the way about how our life keeps finding meaning and direction, fulfillment and consolation, strength and support through the Eucharist and through the community that gathers around the Eucharist. So that's also a significant part of it. Is nobody's going to Mass alone. Everybody's going to Mass with a congregation of people, a gathering of people, and a certain kind of people, the kind of people that make Mass an important part of their life. And so there's a particular kind of congregation that's there that also then supports me and that I can support. I find meaning in contributing to the lives of others and this community. I find meaning in being able to worship God and declare Him as the highest worth, and seeing that a significant part of the meaning of my life is that I can do that. I can acknowledge Him and praise Him, and He is worthy of that. And even when times are hard, I can still worship Him. When times are good, I can still worship Him. I can sustain that purpose through all of the times of my life. So anyway, I just started giving a laundry list of things that are important, but I guess I was building that on the fundamental thing, which is, go commit to it, and those things will keep opening up to you more than we could even describe here, and even more personalized. And we had the culture of that in the past, and well, still, I think Protestant denominations would be a little envious of how strongly the Catholics have emphasized the importance of our Sunday obligation, attending Mass on Sunday, because we have a fair number of people who are still going to Mass beyond what some Protestant churches have. I've been more emptied out because, anyway, we've held the culture, the habit, the expectation of that. At the same time, we are losing some of those people because we're failing to make some of those connections. The way that the Eucharist is celebrated, the way that the community gathers, the way that we're thinking about or failing to think about how this is different. If it's like I went to Mass because my family went to Mass, if that was the only reason for a long time, and now my family's not going to Mass, well, now why am I going to Mass? And sometimes the thinking ends there, and I just stop going to Mass, rather than saying, well, maybe there's another good reason to go to Mass other than my family goes to Mass. And it was sort of my experience with students at Penn State when I arrived there as a freshman, meeting other students who are still going to Mass because their family goes to Mass. And then at Penn State, their family is not going to Mass, and then they were not going to Mass. And when I asked them, why do you go to Mass? They said, I don't really know why I go to Mass. Anyway, developing the habit, and then developing a habit of rediscovery. If this is really the source, center, and summit of everything, then how is it the source, center, and summit of my life at this moment? And as my life changes, how do I keep reconnecting? So I think those those things are really foundational, and then we can keep exploring, and maybe you'll have questions about some things in particular that we can bring out. I've mentioned a little handful of different ways that Mass is transformative for our lives, but we can go into any of those in more detail.
Well, that's one of the great benefits of Mass, and also one of the hard parts of this conversation, is that it gives you answers so personalized to you because you're experiencing them within you. And then being at Mass will give you feelings and answers that they deter problems from even occurring. Like I know that this has happened from just me being a father, is that there are certain things that have come to me in Mass in terms of how to interact with both of my sons that, later in life, my wife ends up getting one of those many books that teach you how to be a better parent or whatever. I was like, oh, I'm already doing that. And sure, it's a personalized answer because that's what I was coming to and doing and calling with, as well as, getting better education, be better at my job at sales and whatnot. So, which is all good stuff. But those are also personalized answers. And the great part is that Mass gives you that. And you went through some various different things for different elements in your life that really a benefit, because I see people that are lacking them and they miss the boat. Now, I do think that there's a part that we might be taking for granted in this process. You obviously are at a spot where you are fully enveloped and engaged in the Mass. Oftentimes you're the priest at the front performing the Mass. And I say it that way, not just because I don't know the right word, but because there's a lot of people who are in that category of I just come because my parents come, that don't really know how to internalize the Mass or make it part of them to engage them, which is where all of these benefits you sort of talk about emanate from. For there, it's still, this is just a room I have to be in and not get in trouble, because that's how it was when I was 4, and I never really grew up from there. So there's a lot of people that don't take that step, and quite frankly, I'm not even sure I took that step properly or even fully, but that is a process to go from don't be socially awkward because I'm doing the wrong thing as the rest of this congregation knows what to do and I don't. And now I feel socially awkward and weird, and that's a bad feeling, so I don't want to do that again. And that's where a lot of people stop. It's, well, if I'm not getting anything out of this and I feel weird, I feel awkward, why would I put myself through that? And in most situations, it's a very good and natural solution. It's why you see essentially similar type people do similar type things, follow the same music, go to the same kind of restaurants, etc., because they don't want to feel weird or awkward, right? So how do we talk to someone to not have that, I don't know if risk is the right word, but that potential social downside deter them from engaging in the Mass? And then furthermore, to the next step, how do we become active in the Mass to be able to feel these benefits that in theory everyone around me who's coming here a lot?
Sorry, what was the first part of that?
So how I guess maybe your answer is going to be just do it, but how do we get people not to feel that social awkwardness, or I'm just literally going through the motions that everyone else are, but actually engage in the Mass and become a part of it?
Yeah. Yeah, great questions. I did write a book on this. It's not the title wouldn't necessarily make it clear that it really addresses very much these questions, the hidden power of silence in the Mass. But the point is really this interior participation. How do I connect with what's happening in the Mass inside of myself? And that's where the silence comes in. Sometimes there's a misconception that if I go to Mass and show up and say all the things and do all the things, like that's all there is to it. And I always like to point out, I mean, if that's the case, then AI could be very good at Mass. We just need, a robot to make the gestures, but the AI is very good at making all the responses and even doing it in a human language. So therefore, is it participating fully in the Mass? Well, clearly not. So what is this participation? It's ultimately an interior participation, which is partially expressed exteriorly. But it goes both directions. By going through the exterior motions, doing the things, saying the things, that can have a way of forming my inside, but then it's also kind of matching up the two places. It's, I don't know, it's nice to, the exterior things are like a plug, but then I need to actually get the outlet properly arranged inside of myself to plug that thing in and to make the connection. And yeah, there are a lot of different ways to do that. Just to think about the introductory rites to the Mass, for example, starting with before Mass, what do you bring to Mass? And how do you connect the world? I mean, most of us are coming in fairly distracted. It's one of the reasons I like really early morning Masses. It's like I haven't had time to get revved up yet in the day, and so I'm have to navigate a little less of myself. But I mean, parents with children, or you're going to an 11 o'clock Mass, and if you're a productive person, you may have done a bunch of stuff before that. Your mind is finding solutions. You're planning out your day. You're having conversations, maybe fights, maybe delightful connections, whatever it is. You're bringing a lot of stuff with you just from that day. And so to come early and give yourself a chance to like let the dust settle, I like to use the image of a snow globe, like let those snowflakes settle a little bit just by kind of taking stock of all the stuff that's going on inside of you. I sit down in the pew and my mind is racing. What's it racing with? Well, it's racing with all the stuff that I just went through. I'm still processing what, this person said to me, and I'm still kind of hurting with something I didn't expect to happen. I'm still excited about a possibility that opened up or an email I received. I'm still great. Whatever it is, it all belongs. All of it belongs in the Mass, because the Mass touches everything that's human. And so starting with the introductory, before Mass, just taking note of what's going on inside of us, not judging it, condemning it, amputating it, attacking it, dividing it, just notice it, what's happening. And then in the introductory rites, there are two different things that we are given the chance to do in silence. Understandably, the amount of silence may vary, but one is the bad stuff. Acknowledge our sins and so prepare ourselves to celebrate the sacred mysteries. And I could even broaden that to like acknowledge our wounds, self-inflicted or other inflicted, my sins and other people's sins, whatever, all the kind of bad stuff, the stuff that's hurting, hard, difficult, and just give that to him. He wants all of it. And so maybe if I've already kind of collected in my hands some of those things before Mass as I'm coming into it, I have that chance, everybody together, I confess to Almighty God and to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have greatly sinned. And I'm just handing all of it over to him. And then the other thing is, more of the good stuff, or the prayer intentions, or the things that are my concerns, worries. And then when the priest says, let us pray, again, there should be a little time of silence, but either way, even while he's saying the collect, that's the time that I can take all of that stuff. And that's where the Mass has created a space, and I can just throw all that stuff into that space. There's a little opening that's come there, and I can just drop it all in there. Now, again, not that all of that has to be synchronized in lockstep. The reality is some of that stuff comes up during the middle of the first reading. And rather than, again, trying to, we have to navigate our interior a little bit. How intensely is it coming up? Is it something I can just kind of gently set aside and pay attention to the reading? Or is it something that's kind of demanding attention? And I can use those same gestures, throwing the bad stuff into the mercy of God, throwing those prayer intentions into the abyss of the Mass that gathers up all of the things that I am. So I learned these interior movements around how to handle the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm dealing with inside of myself, and how to just drop them into this whole thing, which is the Mass, my relationship with Jesus ultimately, and the way that he makes himself available to me, gives himself to me, and receives me, especially in that context of worship. So those are just a couple of examples of ways to connect interiorly and bring these things to him. And all of those things, back to your original question, have a great benefit for us, that I have some place to put that stuff. Things that can feel overwhelming in my own guilt and shame, things that can feel overwhelming in the responsibility and my lack of knowledge and how to deal with the things that I have, but at least I can lift them up and offer them to the Lord.
And Father, I greatly thank you for taking us down this road. I think it's a very beneficial thing as we got to conclude today's episode. And I think it's something we'll continue to dive into the next episode, because obviously there's a lot of follow-up questions I have here, and I don't want to, as we're hitting the hard limit here, I don't want to dive into the next one. So we thank everyone for listening, and we will continue this conversation in the next episode.